We are about to take the perilous next step on a trembling plateau of repression unseen in this nation and the democratic world since the concepts of freedom of speech rose to enable progress and freedom for so many millions.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, Internal Combustion, and numerous other books in 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide. If you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. We have solidarity today from many national organizations, such as the Emerson Family Foundation, the Fuel Freedom Foundation, the Israel on Campus Coalition, as well as Stand With Us, JNS, the Israeli American Council, EMET, American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, ZOA Michigan, the Gross Family Center, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, and plenty more. Thank you, everyone. That said, I only speak for myself and for history. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by members of the Encino, California community who care every day about what is happening everywhere. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Massachusetts, Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from Australia, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, as usual, Great Britain, Canada, Israel, Morocco, Mexico, India, and other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topic, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying scores of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without partisanship to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. And remember, we will not be censored. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our main topic, free speech under fire, in a few minutes after some brief announcements and items from the week. At the Edwin Black Show, we're starting our announcements at our companion YouTube site. We have just released 3 newly edited and visually stunning episodes, long requested. Now they're available. First, a revelatory and reviling episode documenting the monstrous Arab slave trade, which killed so many millions of Africans. And then the frightening World War III nuclear update. And finally, the dramatic story of resistance in the Holocaust. Next week, watch for it, we release the incisive episode from earlier this year on the hot button topic of reparations. See them all at theedwinblackshow.com or search The Edwin Black Show on our YouTube channel. My book tour continues across America. Next week, I arrive in Salt Lake City for a Last Week in May series, 3 exciting events and leadership briefings sponsored by Congregation Call Ami. Hope to see you there. And by the way, my favorite Mexican restaurant in the United States is the Red Iguana. And guess what? It's in Salt Lake City. Now, some major items from the week. First, our weekly AI update. We review the latest warnings on AI almost hourly. This new technological menace is mushrooming so fast that henceforth we will be updating you with some of the most concerning developments on almost every episode of the Edwin Black Show. Today, we inaugurate this by reporting that one, medical authorities in Great Britain are warning that AI could harm the healthcare of millions as it is employed to supervise treatment. For example, the use of AI-controlled pulse oximeters has consistently overestimated the blood oxygen levels in patients with darker skin, resulting in undertreatment of hypoxia for these individuals. Item 2, Geoffrey Hinton, considered one of the godfathers of AI, now warns that AI is more urgent than addressing the threat of climate change. Item 3, the World Economic Forum reminds us that AI could destroy 80% of all jobs within the next 4 years. It's not a long time off. Item 4, Chinese police just arrested a young man who created an AI news feature of a faked sensational train crash. The same could happen with every other sort of nation-captivating event, including a fake nuclear attack. Item 4, Time magazine has just published an essay by a leading AI scientist who states, quote, "If somebody builds a too powerful AI under present conditions," I'm quoting, "I expect that every single member of the human species and all biological life on Earth dies shortly thereafter, period," close quote. Now let me repeat that in case you didn't hear it the first time. If someone builds a too powerful AI under present conditions, I expect that every single member of the human species and all biological life on Earth dies shortly thereafter. The author states in this Time essay, it is now too late to regulate, legislate, or permutate. He is against the 6-month pause that Elon Musk signed and talked about. He wants it all shut down now. That is, destroy the servers, which is something I've been advocated and even Elon Musk advocated. Don't unplug them, destroy them. Until that destruction can occur, I advise that each and every use of AI be labeled with a clear notice, AI generated. We are in danger, and the greatest danger is not comprehending the danger. Pay attention. Second, not everyone knows that Israel just fought another war with Gaza, and indeed is still in military stance. The Iranian proxy in Gaza, known as Palestinian Islamic Jihad, launched 500 missiles across the width of Israel from the border to Tel Aviv. Israel is ramping up its defensive and targeting offensive operations, pinpointing key PIJ military leadership, meaning the top commanders. Israel's Operation Shield and Arrow should be seen as a war not with Hamas, the renegade Iranian proxy Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Here you might benefit from knowing the international laws relating to asymmetric warfare, such as Israel is now engaged in with a well-armed terrorist group that targets innocent civilians. The Louis D. Brandeis Center has compiled an explanation based on international law and practice. We have placed a link to the document in this episode's show notes. Understand, from Israel's point of view, it must decisively eliminate the threat from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is an Iranian proxy, as a prelude to the coming massive assault it plans on the Iranian nuclear establishment. A nuclear establishment that has now achieved the 90% enrichment it needs to create the 5 bombs called for in the Ahmed Protocol to destroy Israel and usher in paradise. Unless Israeli sabotage can delay the process, the HEU, the highly enriched uranium material, can be metallized and inserted into warheads within about a month. To counter Israeli actions, Iran is now creating numerous redundant processing plants. In other words, you take one out and they have 2 more. You take 2 out and they have 4 more. Remember, once Iran gets its nuclear devices, it will be arming terrorist groups around the world. The Biden administration has officially and unambiguously given Israel the green light. Ladies and gentlemen, we are converging on the hinge of history. Third, thanks go to Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who was able to cancel the outrageous anti-Jewish and anti-Israel Nakba event organized by the anti-Semitic wing of the hijacked Democratic Party, in this case led by Rashida Tlaib. The Nakba celebration Tlaib had organized in the Congressional Visitors Center was designed to mourn and condemn Israel for coming into existence 75 years ago. In the process, the Jew hatred ceremony would proliferate the faked history that Israel stole its own land from Arabs who, since 1964, call themselves Palestinians, expropriating the globally recognized Jewish-Palestinian identity, which had been functioning until that moment. The hijacked Democratic Party, with its anti-Semitic and anti-Israel nearly controlling squadron, hates Jews and the Jewish state. This hijacked party has not been able to purge this fast expanding racialist and Jew-hating surge within its midst and continues to represent the greatest threat to Jewish people in this country. Speaker McCarthy is to be thanked for stopping another egregious attempt to falsify the history and facts of Israel's existence. Remember, if the hijacked Democratic Party and its squadron seize control in this country, it's game over for Israel and the Jewish community in America. Fourth, details of the historic graft of the Biden crime family, which is astonishing both for its mega million-dollar scope and its breadth of racketeering finesse, and also breathtaking for its lack of media coverage of these revelations that were released yesterday by the House committee investigating the crimes. It's all coming together. We are no longer talking about just Hunter Biden alone. We are talking about 9 members of the Biden family who have received tens of millions of dollars from the planet's most corrupt countries, such as China, Ukraine, and Romania. The shakedowns and influence peddling are breathtaking. At least 20 LLCs, that is limited liability corporations, were created to money launder million-dollar international wire transfers. Here is just a partial example of these LLCs, all controlled by the Biden family directly or through their regular associates. Here comes a little list. Seneca Global Advisors, LLC. Rosemont Seneca Partners, LLC. Rosemont Seneca Principal Investments. Rosemont Realty. Rosemont Seneca Global Risk Services. RSP Holdings. Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners. Rosemont Seneca Thornton. Rosemont Seneca Advisors. Rosemont Seneca Bohai. RSTP2 Alpha Partners. RSTP2 Bravo Partners, and many more. Wired monies where no discernible work, service, or product was provided, no invoice have been detected by congressional investigators. These wires, each of them transferred between $5,000 to at least $3 million per transaction. The money was then moved from LLC to LLC in a classic money laundering scenario. Eventually, after moving from account to account to mask the origin, the funds were dispersed to 9 Biden family members. Specifically, once these millions were received, they were immediately dispersed to the following: the president's son, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's brother's wife, Hunter Biden's girlfriend, also known as his brother Beau Biden's widow, Hunter Biden's current wife, the president's brother, and even 3 grandchildren. Yes, grandchildren of Joe Biden. They're all getting millions from China and other countries for no explainable reason. This is all based on subpoenaed bank records and has not even been officially denied. Much of this occurred while Joe Biden was actually a sitting vice president. Here's an example. Vice President Joe Biden was in Romania to officially address its ingrained corruption and was in country to election on corruption. Shortly after Biden leaves Romania, one of Romania's most corrupt and prosecuted tycoons, Gabriel Provișcu, acting through his blatant enterprises, according to congressional documents, allegedly transferred $3 million in measured repeat wires to Robinson Walker LLC, controlled by Hunter's business partner, Rob Walker. This between November 2015 and May 2017. Of the $3 million, the congressional memo says that roughly 1/3, according to bank records, that's $1,038,627.08, was transferred to bank accounts belonging to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's daughter-in-law Hallie Biden, and an unnamed Biden family member only known as Biden. These types of shady transactions caused numerous bank officials to issue more than 120 Treasury Department mandated SARs, that is, suspicious activity reports. The average money launderer and gangster might trigger just a handful, but more than 120 is a new land speed record for corruption. It seems only a matter of time before Joe Biden himself personally is identified as the unnamed Biden, who either directly or beneficially became enriched by these unexplained millions. Remember, Trump had hotels and golf courses. Jimmy Carter had a peanut farm. Dick Cheney had construction companies. But there is no discernible business, service, product, or commercial charge, or even invoicing. Just raw money. Why? Articles of impeachment were being discussed yesterday in the corridors of Congress, but this topic is not discussed on the network news such as ABC or NBC. So follow the New York Post, Fox News, Wall Street Journal, and the congressional investigations themselves with their documentation to get the documents as they emerge. And now for another dismal and worrisome episode, free speech under fire. Shortly, I shall be talking about a dark and dangerous cavern. But first, understand that today we are not talking about an assault of ordinary censorship by YouTube, Facebook, Google, campus suppression and oppression of differing ideas, or even the woke and croaking revisionists who successfully canceled such movies as Gone with the Wind and removed guns from scenes of Steven Spielberg's famous E.T. We are beyond that, way beyond that. We are about to take the perilous next step on a trembling plateau of repression unseen in this nation and the democratic world since the concepts of freedom of speech rose to enable progress and freedom for so many millions. Today, we speak of criminalized opinions, speech, and ideas, the sort of tyrannical action taken during much of human history before democracy, the sort of mental controls exercised by Hitler, Stalin, and now communist China. We will see these dragons of speech preemption, not in a distant land or a dark chapter of the last century, but before us in the land of the once free and the home of the previously brave. The worst elements of the Biden administration are now creating the legal framework to criminalize ordinary speech, ideas, and questions unwanted by the ruling regime. The three key terms being thrown around are misinformation, which is unintentional, disinformation, which is intentional, and a new term, malinformation, which is malicious, deliberate, and dangerous by design. The FBI already has numerous agencies quietly gathering information on a variety of opinions, from parents objecting to errant school boards to unwanted election commentary. But it's not just the FBI. The State Department has now created the GEC, that is the Global Engagement Center, created by the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which enjoys a $12 million annual budget, and that will rise to $14 million in the next fiscal year. And this agency will coordinate the international efforts to suppress and even criminalize unwanted speech in accordance with a principle established by the United Nations, specifically UNESCO, the doublethink United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. The UN is all in on stopping wrongthink. Secretary General Antonio Guterres believes misinformation is a threat to all personal freedoms. But who decides? This is the same UN controlled by Russia, which has successfully banished the word war to refer to its invasion of Ukraine. This from discourse in the UN and indeed throughout Russia. Russia has mightily created a mountain of disinformation and misinformation regarding everything about its unholy war in Ukraine. We all remember the false flag efforts and the latest funny stuff with a so-called drone attack on the Kremlin. This is the same UN controlled by China, which has tried to forbid references to COVID-19 as the Wuhan virus, even though our own FBI and government scientific community has long ago concluded it was a lab leak in Wuhan, China. This is the same UN dominated by numerous countries in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation States, which imposed a death sentence for religious blasphemy or drawing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, and are busy setting up parameters right now for prosecuting words spoken which are deemed Islamophobic. The UN is now also establishing truthful measuring on the nature of women. This at the UN Commission on the Status for Women, which has 45 active members. Let's go alpha. At the very top of the list is Afghanistan. This is for status of the women. Let's not leave out Pakistan and Somalia. Countries such as Canada and the European Union members are joining forces with international personalities at the UN, NATO, the so-called G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, the Media Freedom Coalition, Freedom Online Coalition, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to create the international infrastructure to control, criminalize, and prosecute unwanted speech. A phalanx of U.S. government agencies is prepared right now to work with all these groups. Beyond the agencies I mentioned, we also have the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, Homeland Security's Countering Foreign Influence Task Force, and a year ago, the Defense Department established an Undersecretary for Countering Foreign Influence Task Force. Recently, the Pentagon has created the Influence and Perception Management Office. Perception. The IPO is tasked with, quote, the development of broad thematic messaging guidance and specific strategies for the execution of DoD activities designed to influence foreign defense-related decision makers to behave in a manner beneficial to U.S. interests, period, close quote. Now a brand new coordinating and overarching agency has been created by the Defense Department. It is known as the Foreign Malign Influence Center. That is a coordinating Defense Department agency over all our other domestic agencies, and they will coordinate this with international agencies from Afghanistan to Zambia. It will now be possible to advance, regulate, and criminalize speech on climate, the topic most discussed by the speech controllers, and soon political matters such as election and even individual politicians. Gendering and misgendering is being discussed as a criminal act, not only locally but internationally. Reproductive rights, pandemic topics, a range of issues are being reviewed, as is the levels of enforcement and preemption of speech. We have the laws in the United States in place right now, and we have had since 1918, when the American sedition laws were passed by the Wilson administration, criminalizing what he deemed anti-government attitudes. Those sedition laws are hardly dead letter laws. They are the very laws being used to prosecute January 6th offenders. Soon AI might be controlling who can speak and what the topics are. Google and Microsoft are advocating for that right now. It is being built into the very software I am using to type this monologue, Microsoft Word, which now cautions me against using certain terms or usages. Earlier, I spoke of a dark and dangerous cavern. It isn't that we are moving toward the speech control cavern. The cavern is moving toward us. This is a giant topic with many vectors, but we are starting here. To aid us, I've invited Canada's foremost privacy and access expert, Sharon Polsky, who heads up the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. Sharon is our resident guru on such matters, and so I invite her to speak. Speak now, Sharon, while you still can. Take the stage.
Edwin, you are so absolutely right. I hold on my desk always a small reminder of times not so long past and about to be again. It's an original identity card from a place referred to as CCCP, a place where my grandparents fled to come to the freedom of Canada. And I've often thought of what did they live through, from horse and buggy to men on the moon, but they didn't live long enough to see the internet that has made it possible for us to communicate remotely and work and go to school remotely and socialize and do everything we do and express ourselves online remotely. And millions of us do that every day. And so do people who say things that might hurt our feelings or scare us or puzzle our children, things that we might not want to hear or that we disagree with, or whose comments we think are so vile or false or spurious that they shouldn't even be allowed. The convenience of the internet has also changed how we interact and how we handle difficult situations and insulting comments. For hundreds of years, children were taught that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, we could walk away from the schoolyard bully, but it's not so easy to silence a bot or an online bully with sticks and stones now. The internet has also given opportunities because it's opened doors into our lives. So scammers who will happily bilk you out of every penny you have or entice you to send revealing photos will then threaten to expose you to the world. Bots and bullies badger us, bringing some of us to tears, and others, including many teenagers, to take their own lives. And that's happened around the world. It's surely not what Tim Berners-Lee had in mind when he invented the World Wide Web in 1989. And since then, the web has shifted from a place to share good ideas to a place that protects bad ones, or false ones, fake ones. But what is bad or false or misinformation often depends on who's looking and judging. Governments have started to look closely, and they're concerned that what's available on the internet is harming people, children in particular. And that's the rationalization that so many governments have used to demand greater scrutiny of online content, to protect us from hurtful content, to protect us all against criminals and terrorists who use the internet to plan their attacks, and of course, to protect children from being bullied, from being lured, or from seeing things that they shouldn't. The Children's Commissioner for England just reported that the behavior of children as young as 8 years old is being affected by them viewing pornography, and she's pushing for age verification. So it won't just be children, it will be everybody who will have to prove their age before being allowed to use a website or a service, leaving a tidy digital trail revealing who you are, where you went, what you said, and where you were when you visited that website. But it's more than that. It's an ideology being promoted that is shifting the focus from what is to what is possible. Criminalization based on what if. In crafting the UK's online safety bill, which is intended to, quote, protect children from harmful content such as pornography and limit people's exposure to illegal content while protecting freedom of speech, admirable, the Department for Culture, Media, and Sport accepted recommendations from the Law Commission for crimes to be based on, and I quote, likely psychological harm. In Canada, the Supreme Court confirmed not very long ago, once again, that even speech that is controversial or repugnant has social value and should be protected from unjustified state intrusion. And even if you find a comment distasteful, there's no right to not be offended. But also in Canada, where hate speech was defined long ago as anyone who willfully promotes genocide or incites hatred in public, That's been expanded to put in measures that the government has said are fundamental and necessary to prevent certain categories of content from reaching Canadians. Everything from hurtful comments, internet content that promotes views that undermines Canada's government's word, not mine, social cohesion or democracy, and they haven't defined social cohesion, and any content that might undermine, again, their words, the credibility of government, public service, or federal institutions. In 2017, the Government of Canada enacted Bill C-16, adding gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. And it also amended the Criminal Code of Canada so that any crime motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate based on gender identity or expression constitutes an aggravating circumstance that a court must now take into consideration when it imposes a sentence. Bill C-16 created a conflict of rights, though, between women and children and some men. It's been referred by some people as the bathroom bill or an abuser's charter, because anyone who complains about the presence in women-only spaces of men who identify as women can now be charged criminally. Those who would question the fairness of men competing in women's sports have been silenced by the same legislation. Ireland's new hate speech their new law does more than offer 5 years in prison for violating clear provisions of a law that includes vague definitions like misgendering someone or talking about race, color, nationality, religion, gender, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, long list, talking about these things in a way that could incite violence or hatred against a person or a group of persons. 5 years. It also offers a 2-year jail sentence for anyone caught with unpublished material that could incite violence or hatred against a person or group of persons, and if it's reasonably assumed the material was intended to be communicated to the public. So something I wrote that I might have intended to release to somebody else, a member of the public, is enough to get me 2 years in jail. Problem is, now it's up to civil servants in Ireland and Canada, the UK, US, EU countries around the world to determine what is misinformation, disinformation, what is true, and what's harmful according to the policy and persuasion of the government of the day, and undoubtedly the personal preferences and biases of those sitting in judgment of what we can or ought to be able to read or say or watch. You're absolutely right. It is a dark future for us. And I say often that I'm looking forward to the day, I won't be surprised, when identity cards are not just digital, but the only media we have to go to is now named Pravda.
Just more frightening affirmation of the problem we are facing. Thank you, Sharon, for those remarks. I took so many notes, I don't know what to ask you first. I was struck by this vague construct in Canada that you could be prosecuted for remarks that interfere with Canada's social cohesion. Can you tell us more about that?
It's a long and I dare say sordid history, but there's been a succession of governments at the federal level, one after the other, that have tried to infiltrate the internet. Always, inevitably, it's based on the rationale of protecting children. And I absolutely agree. Children are violated, sex trafficked, horrible things are done to children, and the internet has been a wonderful way of the perpetrators finding children, luring them, committing these vile acts. So our governments want to be able to ensure police can have the tools that they need, whether it's artificial intelligence, facial recognition, breaking encryption to be able to monitor all internet content, to be able to find the perpetrators so that the children can be protected. Perfectly legitimate and wonderful, honorable goal. Problem is how it will be perpetrated, because the only way to find what's going on the internet to be able to stop it is to break encryption. You break encryption, that means none of us have any privacy, whether it is in our personal communications, business communications, lawyers with their clients, doctors with their patients, politicians with their politician colleagues. Nobody gets to have any privacy unless somebody affords them that privacy. And keep in mind, in Canada, there is no charter protected recognition of privacy as a fundamental right. UN recognized it, Canada has not. So we go back to about 2012 when there was a member of parliament, Vic Taves, who tried to put in what was referred to at the time as lawful access legislation to be able to provide police, law enforcement with lawful access into the internet, into your conversations, into encrypted communications. At one point, he made a remark to the effect of, you are either with us or you are with the pedophiles, that essentially got him laughed out of Ottawa, and he went back to sit on the bench in Manitoba. That attempt at legislation failed. There's been others since. More recently, Bill C-10 that failed when the government prorogued Parliament and called an election to create the refreshed current government that brought it back in as Bill C-11. And that was when we heard the words from one of our MPs that because, oh, and of course, they took a page out of Washington, D.C., January 6th, I believe it was January 7th or 8th, when one of our MPs said that what is done on the internet, it facilitates things such as the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. That is a threat to democracy. Therefore, we must be able to control what's on the internet, control content, a euphemism for speech, so that we can protect democracy.
I am reminded that that McCarthy in the United States was trying to protect the country from a communist under every rock. And I assure you, communism in the United States in the 20th century, especially the beginning of the first decades of the 20th century, was dedicated to overthrowing the United States government. But the McCarthy idea was to see a communist under every rock, under every table, and in every corner. And this is what was terrorizing the United States. The war on terror did the same thing. If you see something, say something. And so innocent Sikhs from India who are not Muslims, were identified as Muslims, were harassed by police. Mosques were infiltrated. Now we have the FBI in the United States calling parents domestic terrorists for speaking up against errant school board meetings. I'm just really frightened for what's going on. We're going to take some questions here. First one is from the Villages in Florida. This is to Edwin and to Sharon. Have you ever been threatened for speech by any government agency? Well, first, I will just have a parenthetical remark that Taibbi, the guy who exposed the Twitter files, was threatened because of a typo, threatened with prison from the Hall of Congress by these fascists in the hijacked Democratic Party who are against, from top to bottom, journalism. But I will say that my personal experiences are these. And I guess I should also mention that YouTube consistently threatens our show and every other show and every other communicator on YouTube with covering topics that they do not want covered. For instance, just a few days ago, I learned that our YouTube channel is now frozen because of a discussion that we had a couple of years ago about a certain election, which I'm not going to specify. And as a result of that, they said it violated their rules. In fact, their rules prohibit discussing in this fashion any American presidential election going back to George Washington and in Germany and Brazil. So I'm really astonished, but I will give some personal examples. I was investigating a judge and the prosecuting attorney on a famous case in Iowa called the Rubashkin case. This is where a meat packing house doing kosher food was put out of business. It was Rabbi Rubashkin, and everybody jumped on him, and I was the only reporter to investigate and find misconduct in his prosecution. And at one point, the prosecuting attorney, when I asked a question, said to me, by publishing your article, do you mean to obstruct justice and interfere with our investigation? At that time, say that again so I could write it down with a pencil and paper. And he didn't say it again. He was trying to threaten me, which I don't threaten. I'm willing to go down at this point in my career, but I will not be threatened, and we will not be censored. Even if YouTube tries to trash this entire show and its tens of thousands of views, we have alternatives, so we will not be censored. So that's my one example. I probably have more. Sharon, have you ever been threatened by a government agency for any of your speech content?
Well, I know there was one government agency that wanted to bring me in for some consulting, but when the topic of me heading up the Privacy and Access Council of Canada and being contacted and speaking fairly freely with media frequently, they said, well, you won't be able to do that if you're working with us. I said, then thank you very much, but I won't be working with you. That is non-negotiable. And I'm sorry, but it is not negotiable still. Have I been threatened? Not overtly that I am aware of. That's the key. Are we aware of these things? Has somebody put spyware on my phone? Perhaps. It's readily available. I've spoken to Parliament about that, how readily available it is internationally. Am I a target? Maybe. Has anything overt happened? No, although there have been times where I put something online and then I'll have a look and see at some point later on who has visited our website, and intelligence agencies have been there. All of a sudden they start scouring. Why?
All right, from the watch party in Newton, Massachusetts, they want to know what my thoughts are on misgendering someone as a criminal act. First of all, this whole idea of misgendering someone is a conversation that should not be on our national palate. LGBTQ plus, as I said last week, is not important and should not be on our national palate. These are sexual activities which are personal, individual. These people deserve their privacy. And in addition to, as I said last week, to LGBT, I got some other acronyms for you: TMI and MYOB. Too much information and mind your own business. And we also have in that construct something called gender fluidity, where a guy decides one day that he's a female, identifies, and the next day he decides, I think I'll be a male again. They go back and forth. And the idea that you can't keep up with this guy's identity and that somehow becomes a prosecutable offense. And I know that there are people in this country right now who have been kicked out of organizations for misgendering. I will never, ever refer to one individual as they. And so I saw an Associated Press release saying they escaped from the scene in a car. It wasn't three guys, it wasn't two guys, it was one person. So we cannot have these constructs. In addition, I'm still reviewing in my mind, what shall I call a man who is a biological man with a set of organs of a man who identifies with a woman? Is it he? Certainly a homosexual who has the identity of a woman is still identified as a man. All these things are private. They're none of my business. There's none of anyone's business. But certainly when these matters are so fluid and there's so many different types of permutations and societies and cultural subgroups involved, it should by no means be a criminal offense. Sharon.
You would have an interesting time seeing what's going on in several cities in Canada where there's drag queens who go into libraries for reading hour to read to children. And I know it's not just in Canada, but in several Canadian cities, there's people, members of the public, who have gone outside the libraries and protested, as is our constitutionally protected right to do, is free expression, free speech, as you call it in the States, free association. We're allowed to voice our opinions short of hate speech. Some people gathered together, they were perhaps loud, boisterous even. The city council immediately passed a bylaw saying, absolutely, your charter protected right to express yourself is not being infringed upon. You're entitled to do that, but you must be at least 100 yards away.
And I saw a woman, I think it was in either Australia or Great Britain, who was arrested for praying silently. And I thought the only place to be arrested for praying silently was on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And now I see that there's this woman who's across the street from an abortion clinic and she's praying silently. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, the thought police, the truth police. I mean, 1984 was not supposed to be the roadmap of how to get where we are today. It was supposed to be a cautionary tale. I think some people need to reread it and realize how fast we have come to that horrible place. And now you were talking about artificial intelligence. That's going to perpetuate the problems of the past. And it's already able to and being called upon to make the determinations that a lot of people refer to as decisions. They make the calculations and spit out determinations that affect lives. And it's not as if we can go and ask the AI to explain itself, or we can defend ourselves against its determination, because it's a computer that even its designers often now don't understand what it's doing, how it's calculating things. It's out of control and it's affecting lives.
Now, we have a couple of different questions here from Chicago, but they combine to say the following. Since much of this misinformation is being pseudo-predicated on foreign influences, malign foreign influences, and since the Democratic Party operatives at the highest level inserted fake evidence to create the Russia hoax, would it not be possible to just plant the evidence that there are foreign actors involved? And here a person is in either Florida or Iowa or Toronto, and they're claiming it's a foreign influence. Heck, I could see someone right now claiming that Joe Biden is not really involved with China with all these massive money transfers. It's all a plant. So I say, yes, that is part of our worry, part of the fear that you could be accused of being a foreign actor. Isn't that what McCarthy did all along, accusing people of being foreign actors under the control of the communists? In fact, Chris Christie just now said that Donald Trump was Putin's stooge or Putin's puppet because Donald Trump wanted to end the war. But Sharon, what about this, that people can be falsely implicated as foreign actors? Wasn't that the problem that immigrants faced, the so-called fifth columnists, etc.? What's your thought?
Go back to the French Revolution. J'accuse. The onus has been put on you and me to defend ourselves against the allegations. You're a communist. No, I'm not. Prove that you're not. How do you prove something that doesn't exist when all the evidence is being controlled by the same people who have to who are prosecuting you, or persecuting you perhaps? How do you defend against that? And again, when everything that we are doing now, we've been trained over the last 25 years to do it all online because it's much more convenient. For who? Well, we're starting to find out it's not for thee and me. It is for the convenience of the governments. There was a wonderful piece, again, on the spyware, on a variation of the spyware I was reading earlier today. A company out of Israel, they don't offer spyware the same way Pegasus does, where it infiltrates your phone and monitors all the content and your communications live time. It works a completely different way. It goes to the advertising databases, because every time you log on to a website, every communication you make, everywhere you go, it leaves a digital trail. And there's usually little hooks in there that report your activity to the likes of Facebook, Google, and literally hundreds of data brokers that buy and sell this information to be able to, on an auction basis, get your attention. post the personalized ads to get your eyeballs looking at their ads. All this information is traded in the background. And one by one, each bit of information might be innocuous and doesn't identify you, but you put enough pieces of information together, like 2 or 3 of them, and there's thousands of bits of information about each of us floating around. You put that together, that gives a very, very detailed, accurate, and usually credible profile about us. And that is something that governments are buying so that they know exactly who we are, where we are, when we say things, what we say. Sure, we can go ahead and say it. Our right to freedom of speech isn't being interfered with, but at what cost? And as I say,
Remember,
we've been taught to do it all online.
remember, the information age was born not in Silicon Valley, but in Berlin in 1933. It was IBM offered the Nazis the punch cards with the flyer and with the slogan and with the motto, "We see everything." It was originally conceived by the creator of the company, Herman Hollerith, as a means to control populations. It was offered to the Tsar. Here's a question from Maureen in London, and it's about the Polish criminalizing certain speech involving the Holocaust. For instance, if you use the term Polish concentration camps, instead of saying concentration camps in Nazi-controlled, Nazi-occupied Poland, you can be prosecuted. And so now I'm very careful, and I say concentration camps in Nazi Poland or Nazi-occupied Poland. But there are a lot of people who innocently just say Polish concentration camps. We talk about French concentration camps. There were camps in Canada. There was even camps in Great Britain. And this is part of an increasing problem, that it's not just about gender. It's not just about politics. It's about whoever country and whatever controlling factor decides they want to see controlled. And the reason we're doing this episode is not because words are going to be censored, but because there's going to be international policing ramifications, just as there were on COVID-19. Sharon.
Well, I've heard the same thing about how to not refer to Poland and events during the Holocaust. And ignorance of the law is not a defense. I get that. But what do you say, Edwin, when there are countries like the one to the north of yours, where civil servants at the highest levels, at the Treasury Board of Canada, which is kind of the governing administrative bureau, they have recently issued a proposal to allow all federal regulatory organizations to incorporate internal documents by reference. So something that a bureaucrat writes up, and they look and go, I think this should be the law. Let's make it so. It is now so. The proposal does say that the documents will have to be available free of charge in both official Canadian languages, English and French. They will have to be listed in a central location. There will have to be a document management plan for each document. Terrific. But the proposal does not require that any portion of the published document management plan be made publicly available. The proposal does not require any public notice of the internal documents incorporated by reference. And the proposal does not require the location of that centralized list to be made public, or that access to the database itself be free of cost just to the documents. So fine, we're going to have new law that's incorporated by reference and can be changed without any external scrutiny, without parliamentary discussion or debate. And Canadians, I suppose, and visitors inevitably will have to know about these hidden laws. At least the Polish one has been popularized in the media.
Howard in Germantown, Maryland. How should we distinguish between parents protesting drag queens from the Westboro Baptists harassing mourners of slain soldiers? Well, that's a very interesting case. Everybody has the right to redress. It's guaranteed in our Constitution. Everybody has the right to protest. Now, I should say this, all protest must be peaceful and peaceable, peaceful and peaceable. In the case of the parents protesting drag queens, sometimes they get out of hand, but these parents have a right to protest drag queens at the libraries. I personally don't understand why the hell we're talking about drag queens in this country when we're getting ready to see 4 nuclear wars break out, one from North Korea, one from Iran, one from Russia, and one from China. But apparently this is at the top of the agenda. Now, how do you discriminate these protests from the Westboro Baptists? I know something about the Westboro Baptists, and those were harassing protests. These were protests designed to harass individuals, to make them feel uncomfortable. And the Supreme Court and many of my legal experts on this show disagree with that, like Nathan Lewin, say, well, that was within their right. In the same way, the Biden administration allowed illegally protesters to protest on the doorstep of Supreme Court justices and also make them feel uncomfortable and attempts to sway their legislation. This question that you've asked, Howard, is the essence of what defines our civilization and our democracy, our ability to find a focus. Now, our last question today is from Wes. And as usual, Wes wrote a very long introduction to the 1-sentence question. But what he is basically saying is he's talking about how the Stasi operated in East Germany during the Soviet era. And he wants to know, would it be possible for this to happen in the United States, given the power of our technology and where no one feels secure in their thoughts? Wes, you have it right. You don't know how right you have it. It's happening now. Don't say, is it possible? It's happening right now. I'd like to put something before you, Wes, and before Sharon, and before my viewers, that you've probably never thought of before. How would you like to discover that as you're typing in Microsoft Word, keywords are being sent off to a censoring source? Keywords are being sent off to a monitoring source. And so something you may erase 30 seconds from now is actually being sent off on what Sharon called future crime. Sharon, what are you saying to Wes and to me?
It's not future crime. It's already happening. There's countless websites, including mental health websites, hospitals, children's care websites, where as the website pops open, your presence there has already been communicated to Facebook specifically. Many times they will use the same facility to capture keystrokes. Things that you have typed in and decide to change have already been captured and sent off. And it doesn't matter if you have an account with Facebook or Google or any of the others, your information has been captured. And it all goes back to the fallacy of the current model of consent. If you want to use this website, if you know to look for the so-called privacy policy, if you can plow your way through it, if you can follow the duplicitous legalese that so many of them have, you give consent for them to collect your personal information for things as specific as business purposes, whatever that means. What it actually means in practice is to improve their business and their bottom line. They will barter and trade and sell your personal information, give it to whoever is the highest bidder for your eyeballs. It's already happening because it promotes an economy. It promotes economic innovation and technological innovation. And with all of it, it provides governments not only with tax dollars, but with information about us.
And so basically,
the Stasi is here. It's already here.
The Stasi is here. Everybody is in on it. The corporations, the governments are getting dividends. I would just like to note that I use a lot of audio files and dictation in my WhatsApp. And I recently used the word bullshit and I found the B with a bunch of asterisks that WhatsApp tried to block my use of it. Naturally, I deal with a lot of negative topics, death and destruction in my work, and I was quoting someone, and Microsoft came up with an editor saying, do you want to use a racially charged term or something of that nature? Sharon, this is only the beginning of a very frightening discussion, but we're out of time now. I want everybody to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I want to thank my esteemed and insightful guest, Sharon Polsky. Plus, I thank my talented international team, including Sims in South Africa, Nick in London, and Virginia in New Jersey, for their outstanding work, as well as many others in numerous cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. I and we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here next week at 3 p.m. Eastern. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events next week. I will be in Salt Lake City presenting the facts on IBM and the Holocaust and the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Farhood. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust, soon to be a major Hollywood blockbuster if the writer's strike can finally finish up, and War Against the Weak, as well as Internal Combustion. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal, newly redesigned website by a guy in San Francisco. Go to edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts, participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show, and click that notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on Twitter and Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. Our decisive future no longer lies over the horizon or even around the corner. Our future is straight ahead and racing toward us at high speed. Thank you, world, and I am zooming out.